Welcome to the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in critical times. Here's your host, Bill Kelly.
Hi, I'm Bill Kelly from the Bill Kelly Podcast. We're in the midst, actually into the final stages of our election here in Canada. April 28th, of course, is voting day. It's not unusual, maybe not so much in Canada, but in other jurisdictions, especially with our friends south of the border, to have endorsements, of course, for people that are running for elected office. Celebrity endorsements seem to go a long way. I know it runs rampant, I guess, maybe even overboard in the United States, especially in this last general election they had in the United States with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, where a number of celebrities on both sides jumped in, weighed in, hosted fundraisers and things of this nature. It's part of the political process, whether you like it or not. And I know that it has its detractors, but every now and then somebody comes along that I think puts a sense of pragmatism to what's going on, and maybe has that ability to be able to sift through all the crap that we're inundated with on a pretty daily basis here during elections, and maybe give us a more clear picture as to what we're challenged to do here and what the outcome should be and the implications of that outcome. And to that point, there was a letter that Neil Young wrote to Mark Carney that I think follows into that category. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of Neil Young. Loved his music, always have for many, many years. I've been around a while. I still think Harvest by Neil Young is one of the greatest rock albums of all time. His artistry, his insightful approach to life is always something that's intrigued me. He marches to his own drum, and always has, but many artists are like that. But anyway, I find it interesting. I'm not going to say that Neil Young doesn't get involved in issues, because he does on a pretty regular basis. But you rarely see him jump into the political arena to pick one candidate over another. But that changed with this letter. This is an open letter to Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, from Neil Young. It's not that long. I'm just going to give you a sense of what's going on. Neil writes, "Dear Mr. Carney, I am writing because I want to tell you how much I appreciate and support what you're doing to try to make our country, Canada, great. Although I have lived in the United States for most of my life and recently became a citizen of the USA, I am a Canadian and always will be. Now a dual citizen, I was born in Toronto, lived in a small town of Omemee in Ontario. That's near Peterborough, by the way. I've endured polio when I was young. I hardly understood what was happening to me and worried every day that I was going to die. It was a miracle I survived, and my childhood continued. My parents were wonderful. They let me have chickens. They let me play my guitar. Our dinner conversations covered everything from world issues to sports to stuff that was just plain interesting. But life isn't perfect, and our family split up. That's when I moved to Winnipeg with my mom, and the course of my life became clear. I became a musician and played at high schools and community clubs throughout the wonderful province of Manitoba. And like you, I've met a lot of people in my career from many walks of life, some who were wonderful, a great help to me, some who were just there for a little while. At this stage of my life, I am thankful to all of them who showed up and joined me on my journey, and I am so grateful to have had the luxury of a spotlight to bring attention to important causes and try to lead the charge through my music for rights and fairness on behalf of the people. It was an urgent call for all of us to speak truth to power. So, here we are again. Canada is facing threats to its very existence, incredibly, from people who we thought were our friends. They want our resources. They want our land. They want our fisheries. They want our water. They want our Arctic. Maybe they even want our souls. I know a U.S. president that could use a soul. Well, it takes more than bravado to fight this kind of a threat. It takes brains, deep economic knowledge of how the world works. It takes strong, intelligent strategies, and the ability to recognize and seize opportunities, both at home and on the world stage. Opportunities that can bring a new level of prosperity and safety to people who right now may be paralyzed with fear as they look to the future of Canada and the world. Mr. Carney, I believe you are that person to do it. I believe you are the person our country needs to lead us through this crazy situation and bring us out the other side as a stronger, smarter, more resilient Canada. Our core values of caring and fairness and generosity intact, along with our souls. Without a doubt, you got the chops to get it done. And man, have you got the guts to take it on. It's a heavy lift for sure, Mr. Carney, but I, for one, am with you all the way. Peace, Neil Young. That's, I think, something that I think captures the sentiment that a lot of people are feeling in this country these days. And again, he's a guy that has fought for causes that he believes are right for our planet and for the people in this world too. And so it's, on one hand, it's not surprising that Neil Young would weigh in on this, but I think he, because of his sensitivity to what's going on in the world around us, and to the people that are trying to make decisions about the world around us, felt that it was time that he's got to speak up about this. And I applaud that. Yeah, I've got my bias. I think he's fabulous. But there are others that may have other opinions on this too. But what I think it speaks to, and I think he's mentioned this in the letter to Mr. Carney, is that you can't sit on the sidelines. I mean, when things are happening such as they are these days, you got to pick a side. And you can't just sit on the fence and say, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You have an opportunity to have a say in this. As a matter of fact, you have an obligation to have a say in this. And I think that's what Neil is hinting at in this letter. I mean, he's writing it to Mark Carney, but he's writing it to us as Canadians as well, reminding us that these are the things that are on the line. Now, when he talks about the resources that we've talked about, and I mentioned this is not the first time where this has happened, but there's a real threat here. And I know that, for instance, just to swing back to the political reality that we're facing these days, you've got some, right-wing conservative commentators that are going after Mark Carney and saying, well, he's trying to be the voice of doom. It's the fear factor. And again, that goes back to the whole idea of projection. Poilievre is trying to present this dystopian view of what the streets of Canada are like. That people live in fear of walking out their front door. By the way, as an aside, what I think he was describing, but he may not have known it, was the way the people of Ottawa felt when that trucker convoy took over their downtown and threatened and basically scared the hell out of people. That's the sort of thing. And by the way, Mr. Poilievre was, instead of trying to help there, was passing donuts and coffee to the people that were perpetrating that illegal activity. But you've got to face facts, and you've got to take a stand on this, and you've got to understand that what makes us great in Canada, and it's not just our resources, although that's a major part of it. And yes, we are the envy of many, many other countries because we are so resource rich. But it's the people. It's our attitude. And he talked about that with the values that Canadians share, and he still shares, of caring, fairness, and generosity. And there are those among us seeking political office that would want to shove those issues aside. This whole thing about wokeism. Well, that means caring and fairness goes out the window. And we instead live by an ideology instead of a heartfelt feeling and compassion for our fellow people. And I think that's what he's talking about. And that's on the line. Make no mistake about it. That's not fear-mongering. That's a look at reality. Because we're seeing it happen on a daily basis, where people are getting picked up in the middle of the night and shoved onto airplanes and taken to a prison in El Salvador, where people are having their voting rights taken away from them. That's happening. That's not just a George Orwell novel. That's going on. And I don't want to see that happen here. And certainly Neil Young, and I'm sure many others, feel the same way. They don't want to see that happen here. So I applaud Neil Young for having the courage to write a letter like this, to take a stand. That doesn't surprise me, as I say, because he's been very vocal about other issues, about pipelines, about forestation, about tearing down forests, as some administrations have been wont to do. He believes in nature. He believes in our planet. And more importantly, as he's mentioned in this letter, he believes in people. And that's, I think, a Canadian value that not every other country shares, especially at the political level. We got to take pride in that. And we have to, I think, accept the reality, as Neil points out here in this letter. There are so many things about Canada that make Canada great, so many things about Canadians that make Canada great. And we have an obligation to make sure and defend those. Because if you don't, if you take those things for granted, then God knows what's going to happen. And once they're gone, they're gone. We can't change, and we can't change what we are in this country. We've got to maintain what makes Canada great. And I think that's what Neil's talking about as a proud Canadian. And so many others, I think, are feeling the same way. So get out and vote. Election day is the 28th. Make sure you make your vote count, and make sure that you stand up for Canada, where we are, who we are, and what we can be. I'm Bill Kelly.
Bill Kelly Podcast brought to you by Wizen's Law, personal injury lawyers. Listen, you didn't choose to get injured, but you can choose the right lawyer. Wizen's Law, 905-522-1102 or wizenslaw.com.